Hello and welcome to The Scoop. My name is Chloe Trapanotto, and here with me today I have Nate Sedlack. Nate is one of the athletic trainers here at Peters Township and has been with us for a year now. He works with the athletic staff to make sure our student athletes are always in tip-top shape and ready to play. For our episode today, he is going to share with us the schooling and training he went through to get here and his experiences on the job. We're also going to get a rundown of what he and his coworkers do on a day-to-day basis. It's good to have you here, Nate.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So why did you choose to become an athletic trainer?
I originally, when I graduated high school, I believed that I wanted to be a physical therapist. I was going to use athletic training as my undergraduate and go on to graduate school for PT. But once I got into the classes and coursework of athletic training, I realized that's what I actually wanted to do.
So what qualities and traits do you possess that make you believe that you would be a good athletic trainer?
Well, I did pretty well in school. I had an interest in like the medical field as well as sports. Obviously, you have to be interested in what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Talking a lot to students, being able to work out puzzles because a lot of times the diagnosis isn't clear.
Okay. So whenever you were in high school, what sports did you play?
In high school, I was on the track and cross country teams.
Okay. So how do you think playing sports in high school helped you later on to become an athletic trainer?
Well, playing sports, that was my really first exposure into athletic training. I had met the athletic trainers at the school that I had gone to. They helped me with a couple injuries. And that's when I really started to consider it as a career field.
So you said you had injuries in high school. How else did they help you, like the trainers in high school? How did you meet with them and interact?
I had sprained my ankle. So obviously we were doing some treatment stuff for that, a little bit of rehab stuff for that. And then afterwards, I stayed in touch with them once I was in school, and they allowed me to shadow them to make sure that was kind of really the right direction I was going. And shadowing them, I felt more in love with the job.
So how do you think being a trainer back then has differed from being a trainer now?
That one is interesting. I graduated from high school in 2012, so it's only been 5-6 years now.
Oh, okay.
When I was in college, there was a big push for evidence-based medicine, which is having research to back what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So I would say there's probably more research-based things that we do now versus when I would have been in high school.
Yeah, so they have more technology and stuff. How do you think the technology's changed?
The technology's a little different. We use different types of modalities, which are things like the ultrasound, the e-stim units. Those have become a lot more prevalent and a lot more available to athletic trainers.
So whenever you were in college, you said you went to Slippery Rock. Mm-hmm. What qualifications did you need to become an athletic trainer?
Well, you have to major in athletic training. We take a lot of classes like kinesiology, biomechanics, anatomy, a lot of anatomy courses. You have to be CPR and first aid certified. Mm-hmm. And then after college, you have to take a certification exam. It's a nationwide exam that everybody has to take.
So how is that exam Is it interactive? Do you do stuff, or is it written test?
It is online. You have to go. I went down to Pitt, I believe, to take mine. It's computer. You're in there for 3 hours, and you just go through and answer different questions, varying from anatomy to how you would treat an injury. So they give you a case scenario, and you have to work through the problem. So
you a year after you graduated college, you came to Peters Township. Mm-hmm. What was the interview process like?
The interview process, mine was a little stressful. I had actually interviewed for multiple jobs within the same week, and then started hearing back from them at different times. I was very interested in this position here at Peters, so it was a little stressful as far as that, but as far as one-on-one, it was very easy, very simple, much like this, just kind of answering questions.
How did they differ, the different jobs and positions?
Mostly just schools, depending on what area you wanted to be in. Athletic trainers can also work in factories or different businesses. So there's different positions like that as well.
So why do you think working in factories and businesses, how do you think that helped become trainers now?
As far as working, what do you mean?
How do you think previous experiences with jobs, for you, what kind of jobs did you have before, and how did that help you now?
Oh, so my previous experience, I worked as a cook at the Gateway Clipper Fleet. I was there for quite a while. I think I started when I was 16. Just being able to go out and talk to people, learning a lot about just the way to interact with people as far as responsibility, doing inventory and stuff like that, just kind of the day-to-day tasks help now.
Okay. So what has your experience been like so far working here?
I really enjoy working at Peters. I'm very happy and lucky, I think, to find a spot that I'm kind of content so fast out of school.
How is it like what you would have imagined? Is it different or like what you would have imagined in this job?
It is. Peters is a lot bigger than I thought it would be. We have a lot of teams. We have a lot going on, but other than that, it's pretty. It's a pretty typical athletic training job as far as at a high school.
How do you think being an athletic trainer in like a large school and a small school differ in terms of like what they do and stuff?
Well, in a large school, we have 3 athletic trainers here. So with a large school, you're more likely to have more athletic trainers and more of a team to kind of cover all the teams. Smaller schools tend to have a more like smaller budgets. They have a harder time getting the equipment they need, which we don't have here at Peters.
What sort of equipment do we have here?
We have lots of tape, lots of medical supplies, bandages, gauze, stuff to clean up. We have plenty of tables, portable tables, coolers, Gatorade. We have stim units. We have ultrasound. We have a fantastic weight room where we can do rehab in. So we have quite a few.
So you said 3 athletic trainers work here. How do you guys split up the tasks evenly?
Well, we all like to rotate through. So each athletic trainer will be with a different team every day. That way, if one of us isn't here, an athlete isn't lost looking for one specific person. They can get treatment no matter who's here. Based on that, it's really just a rotation. We rotate through the high school and the middle school and go from there.
What types of stuff do you do like every day?
So every day we open up, we'll go through our emails, respond to parents if they have any questions, keep up with coaches, check in with the athletic directors, and then we kind of wait for our students to come in. From there, we'll go into prepping everybody for practice, whether it's stretching, heating up, leading them through warm-ups, taping, and then depending on what our athletic schedule is like, whether we have practices or games, that's a little different.
Okay. And you said you worked with the other coaches. How do you guys like correspond with the athletic directors and coaches of all the other teams and work well together to get stuff done?
Well, our biggest thing is our athletic director, so they release the schedule to us and to the coaches. But after that, it's more of a coordination between the 3 of us, emails, phone calls, just making sure everybody's kind of getting the medical coverage they need, and then updating them as far as injuries go, who can play, who's kind of being held back a little bit, and who's good to go.
So what types of, or what seasons are the busiest for you guys?
It would probably be close between fall and spring, to be honest. Fall, we have a lot of athletes. In the spring, we have a lot of athletes in different areas, so we're not all at the high school. Some are in Peterswood, some are up at PV, some are here at the high school, some at the middle school, so that's kind of our stretch between the 3 of us.
Okay. And so why do you believe that some are busier than others?
Why some seasons are busier than
Yes.
others? Just the sheer number of sports played, the number of athletes involved. You look at a football team that has quite a number of kids versus just a baseball team that has quite fewer teams or quite fewer athletes. So it's really just dependent on the sport and what's required for each game.
Okay. So like whenever you're do you guys go to a lot of games? Like do you travel to games? What's that experience like for you?
We travel, so we only travel during the playoffs, but we are here for every home game and we try to be around for every practice. As far as traveling goes, I think that's fun. I got to travel with our boys lacrosse team last year when they went to Whitbeals, and that was a big experience just to see them, how they develop on the road and making sure you don't always have the supplies you need on the road, so you have to kind of adapt and get everybody home before you can really take care of them. Okay.
So whenever you're in a game and somebody comes to you with like an injury, how do you treat them? Like, how do we treat them? So we go through an evaluation process. On the field, it's a lot quicker than, say, in our athletic training facility. But basically, you ask, the history, if they ever heard it before. You look at it, see if it looks bruised, if anything's out of place, if it looks swollen. Then you're going to look at their range of motion, how well they can move, their pain levels, their strength.
and then you kind of from there determine whether or not they are good to go right back in, or if you need a second look, and that's when you pull them from the game to really get deeper in that evaluation.
Okay. When do you know it's time to like go to the doctor if it's that serious? Like how do you judge that?
Well, like most things, it's a little bit of an art. It takes a little bit of experience. Some things, you know right away if you see, say, a broken collarbone and it's sticking up. Obviously, that's a medical situation. As far as something like an ankle sprain, I like to give something like that at least 24 hours to kind of develop and see where they are. A lot of times when an injury first happens, it seems a lot worse than it actually is. So I like to give my athletes time before we can judge the severity of the injury and whether or not further medical assistance is needed or if we can treat it in-house in the school.
So what types of injuries are most commonly associated with which sports? Like, are there more prevalent injuries in different sports than others?
Yes. So the most common one we deal with is probably ankle sprains, with concussions too, probably being a close tie. As far as sport to sport, now you're going to have more shoulder injuries or upper body injuries in something like swimming than you are going to, say, in basketball. So like swimming and baseball would have shoulder stuff. Soccer, you tend to have more knee and ankle stuff, just depending on whether it's an upper body or lower body sport. That's just the nature of it.
So whenever like I played soccer, I know a lot of girls on my team got hurt. What do you say to, like, how do you deal with players that really just want to get back into the game and just don't want to ever stop?
That one's rough. You have to explain to them, sometimes if you really think it's in their best interest to pull them from the game, then you have to explain that, there's a risk of them going back and they can make their injury a lot worse and they will be out for longer. So you kind of almost have to persuade people into realizing that the season is kind of more important than just one game. Other than that, if it's something that they can go on, then you explain to them the risks, you contact parents, you talk to coaches about what can happen if this athlete continues to play, and then you treat them from there. Try to get them day to day.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break. So far, we have discussed Nate's life before coming to Peters Township and why he decided to become an athletic trainer and what he does like on a daily basis. But now we're going to go take a quick commercial break, so stay tuned.
I'm Naomi Judd, and I love my dogs. But disasters like hurricanes and floods and tornadoes can leave pets and other animals injured, abandoned, or lost. American Humane Association's Red Star Rescue has been there when disaster strikes. To learn how you can protect your entire family, go to AmericanHumane.org.
Welcome back to this episode of The Scoop. I am Chloe Trapanotto, and joining me today is Nate Sedlack. Nate is the athletic trainer at Peters Township, and he is going to share with us more about what he and his fellow athletic trainers do daily. All right, so back to going into the injury aspect of it all. What injuries do you find are most harmful to athletes these days?
Well, the biggest trend right now is concussions. You hear everybody talking about concussions through the NFL down to the high school level. That kind of has the biggest impact, I believe, as far as not only sports but academically. You can find challenges with your schoolwork with a concussion, whereas if it was something like a broken arm, you can't play your sport, but your education won't lack. So I think that's the biggest impacting injury.
How do you guys accommodate to like concussions and such in school? How do you work with the nurses and everyone to make sure those players are back to their normal state after injuries?
Well, once we suspect an athlete of a concussion, whether they're displaying symptoms or do they just seem a little off, we will send them to a physician first to confirm a diagnosis. After that, we will contact our nurse and try to get the accommodation process underway. That way, it's kind of a smooth transition for not only the student but the parents as well, understanding that they're getting care not only from the sports side of it, but from the school side of it as well.
So like with other injuries such as first of all, what is the most probably influential or biggest injury that you've ever seen playing?
The most influential, I think I have two answers. So the most influential injury would have been when I was still in school. I had an athlete who had a bulging disc in his back. So yeah, he was having trouble just sitting through a classroom. It was really affecting his education. So I was able to work with that athlete and do some exercises to try to get that injury to calm down and relieve some of his pain. And I think after the first day that we went through the exercises, he was so pain-free and he was so happy to be pain-free because he hadn't been pain-free in a long time, that he jumped up and wrapped me in a big bear hug, which is nice because it was an immediate. You can immediately see the benefits of the work that we did. So that was probably the most influential. Now the nastiest or grossest injury I've seen, those are kind of ties. So you see things that are kind of gross looking as far as like a broken arm where the arm is kind of shaped funny. Bloody injuries, those are always scarier than they tend to scarier looking than they tend to actually be. A lot of times you get them cleaned up and you realize, the gash is only this big, but those would be the biggest injuries I've seen.
How did the child with the disc get that injury? Like, what sport was he playing?
I'm not sure I can answer that as far as a privacy thing, but it was just a sport where he had to extend a lot. He was going down and then up into his play. So that injury, as far as him developing it can be anything from genetics to strength to maybe his form, depending on what he's doing.
So whenever you encounter those more gruesome injuries, like a lot's happening, how do you handle all of that, like that fast-paced, injury?
It's kind of funny. I don't really think about it. I don't necessarily get queasy. I think in this sport, you have to be somebody who doesn't get, or in this job, you have to be somebody who doesn't get queasy. Yeah. Because you never know what's gonna happen. You never know what you're gonna end up looking at. As far as handling it, you kind of just, when you run out on the field and you see blood or you see something looking funky, you kind of just take each problem, walk them through each problem. So you kind of get them to calm down first. You take a good look at the injury and kind of figure out what you're dealing with, and you just solve each problem as they come.
Whenever you were in school, how did they train you for those instances? Like if you were someone that was kind of queasy, how do you think they would help you?
Well, in my experience, our first week of classes, we watched a lot of injury YouTube videos. Actually, the very first day of class, we watched quite a famous injury. It was a hockey goalie who had gotten cut with a skate. And you see the athletic trainer run out onto the ice and slide through, some blood and gore and, kind of put gauze on. And the teacher stopped the video and said, if you're not willing to do that for your athletes, then you might not be in the right major. And that day we actually had 2 or 3 kids pass out. And I think they were, they hadn't realized just quite what they were getting into.
So whenever you come to a player, like their well-being is like kind of in your hands, how do you handle that responsibility?
Well, you have to just, you have to realize it's somebody's kid. Not only is it an athlete who wants to continue to play, it's at the high school level. You guys are kids. You got to make sure that you are acting responsibly at all times and really looking out for their well-being, whether it's pulling somebody from a game when they're not quite, when they're a little reluctant, when it's in their best interest. You kind of have to take that responsibility and almost be the bad guy a little bit. But that's just part of, acting responsibly and kind of handling the pressure. So
how do you deal with the parents that kind of want their kids to just keep going back and pushing? How do you deal with all of that?
That can be a little difficult sometimes. As far as dealing with it, you really just have to educate the parents and coaches as well. That can be sometimes a problem. So educate them as much as you can about what exactly is going on, whether it's the anatomy to how the injury works, what kind of limits they're going to experience, and then you explain the risks of what happens if that athlete continues to play. So if it's, say somebody has a sprained ACL, right? That's a big injury that you hear all the time. With a sprained ACL, you continue to play, you run the risk of tearing it completely. So something that goes from being a break turns into a surgical situation where they're out for months. So you kind of have to explain the reward versus the risk, definitely when it comes to parents, coaches, and even the athletes.
So why do you think it's so bad that children sometimes go back too early. Like, what are the downsides of like getting back into a game too early?
Well, getting back into a game too early, like I said, it increases your risk for more injury. You're probably not gonna play at your best. So at that point, you question whether or not your performance is even worth anything, not to the team per se, but just how well can you actually play if you can't perform, if you're being held back by an injury. Does the reward of the game outweigh the risk of further being injured?
So why do you think team injuries, like if someone on a team gets injured, does that affect the team more if it was a child getting an injury? Like, how do you think that affects team and like individual sports?
With teams, I think it's definitely a lot easier, especially with big teams. You have subs that you can sub people out when needed. So if somebody needs 3 days to a week off to kind of recuperate and work out some soreness, that's a lot easier to get somebody else to jump in. As far as compared to an individual sport, say something like tennis, where you have your match and you're the only one that can play, there's no sub. So they're more likely, I think, to want to jump back in rather than a team sport where you kind of have depth.
Okay. So I know for soccer, sometimes we get athletic trainers coming in and just telling us about like health and nutrition, all that stuff. Why do you think that's beneficial to players to hear all that stuff?
Well, the big thing is nutrition and rest are huge in sports. Equally as important as lifting or working out, I believe. Discussing that with athletes, we hope to reduce their risk of injuries as far as like dehydration. If you're a football player and you're trying to get bigger, if you're not eating right, you're not going to get bigger. As far as nutrition goes, if you're lacking in different things, you're more prone to overuse injuries. So say you're not getting enough protein, your body cannot keep up. You're not fueling your body enough to one, do the activities, and two, repair the body after the activities. So nutrition is huge in sports.
What sport do you find nutrition to be most like a problem in?
That is a good question. Historically, I think across the board, you tend to find nutrition issues more, say, in like a gymnastic area or in wrestling, things where you have to make weight. Body image tends to be a big one in sports like wrestling, gymnastics, swimming. So that tends to be where you can find some issues as far as nutrition, people wanting to look, whether they want to look right in their uniform or they're just not realizing how much they're actually doing and not getting enough.
So how is it difficult for you to go to like a sport like football where it's kind of like more contact and physical to a sport like gymnastics where nutrition's a big thing? Like, how is it difficult for you to go back and forth and treat the injuries there?
Well, you really just have to look at each injury and each athlete on an individual basis. You know what I mean? So you look at them, not only to the sport, you kind of educate yourself a little better on what's likely to happen, but what's likely to happen usually isn't what actually ends up happening. So you tend to just, for me, I look at each athlete individually rather than, sport-wise.
Okay. So like whenever you're in a game, sometimes you got to like run out, help a player. How do you and your fellow coworkers stay in shape to help those players that are injured?
You try to take care of yourself a little bit, as you can. You work out. As far as, on the job, it happens enough, unfortunately, that you kind of just get used to carrying, we've got those big kits and we're carrying coolers. It's just kind of all part of it. You get used to hauling stuff around and running around trying to keep up with high school players.
Yes, it can get pretty fast and everything. All right, well, it looks like that's all the time we have for today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today for this episode of The Scoop. Today we discussed qualifications for being an athletic trainer, what happens on the job, and how the trainers work with each other every day to make each student athlete feel safe and healthy, whether that's on the field or in the locker rooms. I want to thank the media department and Peters Township Community Television for making this possible. And Nate, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Make sure to tune in next time for the next episode of The Scoop.